sorry everyone, I'm just chainsawing my boglins because it is almost August, so good thing to do. Anyway, today we're doing an episode talking about No Man's Sky. It's been a hot minute since we've done that. How exciting! We're talking about No Man's Sky and a number of other games that were one thing at launch and something else entirely much time later after they were subject to Megapatching. Something that isn't just a small number of tweaks and fixes, but a dramatic change. A huge update that makes the game one thing at launch and something else, fingers crossed, actually good, months after the fact. Sometimes, in No Man's Sky's case, years after the fact. So let's talk about No Man's Sky next, and, hope this balances, the concept of the Megapatch.
2 years ago, Hello Games released No Man's Sky, a procedurally generated universe exploration game preceded by an overwhelming amount of hype and promise. The dizzyingly high expectations of customers were directly fueled by the studio and lead developer Sean Murray, who did nothing to dissuade the public from anticipating more than Hello Games could deliver. In fact, the company said many things before release that were blatantly untrue, detailing features for No Man's Sky that were completely non-existent upon launch. While some in the media argued in favour of Hello Games and said the public simply expected too much, a brief look at interviews and public showcases, some published just weeks before the game's release, clearly shows that Hello Games talked bollocks about what exactly people were getting for their money. No Man's Sky launched as a mediocre disappointment, shallow and vapid for its sprawling size. The studio itself went dark, though over time would squirt out some new features and improvements. Fast forward 2 years and No Man's Sky has become No Man's Sky and Next, the subject of a mega patch that has dramatically upgraded the experience. The list of changes is impressively huge, and while I still don't personally care for the game, I can't deny that Hello Games put the effort in. Among the changes are multiplayer, a touted feature before launch that was distinctly lacking in the launch product. Co-op has at last been implemented fully, which brings with it a third-person mode since you actually have character models now. There's unlimited base building, an overhaul to the UI, significant visual improvements, and the ability to manipulate terrain. Alien creatures are smarter, more expressive, and feature enhanced animations. In-game resources have been rebalanced and expanded upon, while crafting has been deepened thanks to the ability to refine materials. Procedural generation now applies to player equipment and starships, expanding upon one's own tools, and those are just some highlights. All told, No Man's Sky Next is a new experience that has made up for the disappointments of the past and brought many players back into the fold. Games have been subject to mega patches before. As one example, way back in 2011, a game called Hydrophobia came out and it was fucking crap. Dark Energy Digital, a studio notoriously protective of its work, and can be abbreviated to DEAD, was unsatisfied with the critical and commercial response, so set to work on Hydrophobia Pure, the first of 2 major updates designed to address the critique. Graphics, physics, controls, platforming, dialogue, cutscenes, weapons, maps, puzzles, etc, everything was given an overhaul, and even that wasn't enough since a second major update, Hydrophobia Prophecy, would introduce more changes and add even more content. Ever since online connectivity became the standard for modern games, patches have become increasingly relied upon. Now that developers can fix shit after launch, it's become easier for publishers to demand earlier release dates with a launch now, fix later approach. This is a double-edged sword, since reviewers and day one buyers will not be kind to a game that launches with a host of bugs and missing features, nor should they be. A game that launches in need of a patch is rolling the dice with its audience, since the first week of sales is the most crucial week, and you do well to avoid controversy or complaints during that period. Nevertheless, marketing and hype have kept many a released game going while their developers toil away on much needed fixing and content addition. This is an issue that's only gotten cloudier as publishers have embraced the live service model, where games are now launched with the expectation they'll wind up a different experience by the end. The benefits are plain as day. A mutable, ever-changing game experience is an exciting environment, but once again, it's a risk. Destiny 2 saw plenty of changes after it came out, changes that pissed off ever more fans with each update thanks to terrible communication, shitty monetization attempts, and just Activision's general fucking involvement. On the flip side, it's not uncommon to hear "this game is good now" about a live service that started out mediocre and was improved over time. Ubisoft's For Honor has found its feet after an embarrassing launch, as has The Division, which was distinctly turdish on arrival but is considered by its fans to be much redeemed nowadays. Then there's early access, of course, similar to the Destiny problem. The original Culling, par exemple, now a free-to-play game following the collapse of its sequel, was lambasted by customers who saw a promising early access launch ruined by constant fiddling changes that rendered the experience unrecognisable and took away things that made it unique. On the subject of early access, this is of course a huge pile of mud in the water, since early access games are, by design, supposed to be inferior versions of their final form. Buying a game early with the expectation it'll be improved is a huge gamble for everybody, since there's no guarantee the game will ever be improved. In fact, many if not most early access games, statistically, are never brought to a full release state, as developers shut down or disappear completely off the face of the earth. Meanwhile, promising games such as We Happy Few can have their reputations damaged by a shoddy early access launch, and find themselves having to work double hard to not only improve the experience, but to convince players to give them a second chance once they've already been turned off. That last point is important, since first impressions are everything, especially in the game world. As noted, the first week of sales is your most important week, since that's when the most amount of marketing, attention and promotion is seen. Many a time a game has seen most of its attention and publicity during early access, only to officially launch and find people are moved on. We're in a market so saturated by content that you generally get one shot, one chance to make an impact, and if you fuck that up, you've got a vertical climb to get back into the good graces of the public, if only for the fact the public isn't even looking in your direction anymore. Patch culture, as I named it years and years ago, is both a good and a bad thing. Mistakes get made and games can launch fucked up thanks to just a little line of code that got misspelled. Hello, Colonial Marines. So the ability to fix it without a product recall is a blessing, but it can also inspire rushed jobs and shoddy games as pressure to make deadlines increases and the safety net of patches becomes an integral part of development instead of what it should be, a bloody safety net. We do get some rare moments where these big mega patches are universally good, however, mostly because the base game was already damn great and the patches just made it better. Final Fantasy 15 is a good example, since the first version was flawed but delightful, and the improvements, ironing out those flaws and adding a big whack of new content, only made it better. It would be great if this was the standard, but unfortunately the standard is disappointing games made good after a ton of extra work that could fall on deaf ears should the audience drop thanks to an awful first impression. Then again, I don't think games being dragged up from disappointing to good is the actual standard. If we're being more cynically realistic, then disappointing to acceptable might be more of a standard. Then we have games that launched with slimy, sleazy, scummy business tactics. The infamous SimCity 2013 boasted always online DRM at the start, which rendered the game unplayable for many thanks to shit-ass servers. Electronic Arts, lying to its audience, said the game needed to always be online for reasons and that they couldn't just patch out an integral part of the game. Later they did, of course, and expected forgiveness and praise for it despite lying. Diablo 3's initial state was downright asshole-ish, since Activision Blizzard tried to force players to use its auction house, a place where players could trade for loot and real-world money. The original version of Diablo 3 was designed to give players a lot more loot for characters other than their own in an attempt to force them into player trading. It made the experience more of a slog, more of a hassle, it reduced the fun of getting loot until finally the auction house was shut down and the game properly rebalanced. The dramatic improvement of the game post-auction house was one of the finer examples of how shitbag monetization methods can significantly damage a game's quality. More recently, Shadow of War finally pulled the marketplace completely, eradicating loot boxes and rebalancing the game to account for it. As well as once again proving how microtransactions can fuck a game over, Shadow of War is a much better experience nowadays, despite Warner Bros.' best attempts to make it atrocious. But should the games be forgiven for this? Well, very few of the aforementioned developers or publishers ever actually said sorry for ruining their games, selling crap products, or rushing out titles with the complacent plan to fix them later, so fuck them. Outlets like Polygon have changing review scores to reflect a game's fluctuating quality, or at least they did last time I checked. And while I see the merit in the idea, I just don't feel games should be outright rewarded for having been misleading or initially sold under false pretenses. Most certainly games like SimCity deserve to have their earlier, less complimentary criticisms and scores immortalised forever as just desserts for their loathsome behaviour. Publishers attempting to cover up their exploitative ideas, often months after launch when the money's already dried up, are dickheads who present their cover-ups as praiseworthy gifts after the fact, expecting gratitude and for their blatant contempt to be forgotten. Many pundits and peoples are all too willing to provide what these publishers want, in fairness. While I'm not usually willing to give Steam much credit, I will say I like its user review system where the most recent reviews are compared to the overall reviews. This can give a much better idea of where a game's current standing is compared to where it was. The only problem here is that user reviews are bullshit and incoherent most of the time, but having snapshots of reviews is a nice idea that could be expanded upon. It is similar to Polygon's idea, but it's implemented in a more natural way, I feel, and in a way that lets you see how the game used to be. While there are good points to patch culture and the idea of megapatches, and it is good to have a safety net, I'd much rather have games released in an excellent state than games that must be dragged up to an excellent state through years of patching. Most of us would have moved on by then anyway. I mean, I did check into No Man's Sky, I still didn't care for it, but ultimately the main reason I'm not playing it right now is I truly have moved on. And I'm playing games that didn't need huge patches post-launch, because guess what? Octopath Traveler is already fucking brilliant. It was a finished product sold for the price of a finished product. Now that, friends, is innovation. The game industry has already done much to train its audience not to buy games at launch, despite that being the time games get the most sales. Thanks to huge price drops, sometimes startlingly soon after release, thanks to Game of the Year editions, thanks to season passes that are much more valuable a year out once they're cheaper and we actually know what we're paying for, there really aren't all that many benefits to buying games immediately these days. It's no wonder they push pre-orders so hard, because pre-order bonuses and shit like that's the only selling point they have for day one buyers now. The mega patches we're seeing for games like No Man's Sky only reinforce the point. It's just another reason not to bother buying a game when it first hits stores. If this is the path the industry is intent on going down, then it is genuinely unwise to buy games until a year later when the GOTY version's out and the game's been patched, until it's actually good. I don't think that's what game patches should exist for, and I don't think it's healthy for the industry. However, I am sincerely glad people finally got what they paid for with No Man's Sky, even if it is 2 years after the fact. Look at all this fucking murk. We got the J emblem hat, you can wear a hat now. We got the Summer of Sterling pin, it's a little Son of a hat. It's really good, I've seen them, they're really good. And we got the Ringmaster shirt and Jim fucking Sterling Son shirts. And you just get 10% off if you use the code Chungus for the Summer of Sterling. It's on the Shark Robot store, go get it, Shark Robot. Jimquisition, look for it. You fucks.
Now I must stress, because people are just going to think I'm being ungrateful or unnecessarily mean, or he just can't be pleased, that's what they'll say. There's no pleasing him. I gotta say that while again I don't care for No Man's Sky Next, did try it, but I do respect what they did. It is impressive. It is a huge fix. It is, in many ways, very different from how it was. And I am sincerely pleased that people got what they paid for. Again, after the fact, but they got what they paid for in the end. And the work that was put into it cannot be understated. But, as I say, the industry better not get too complacent and think they can keep doing this, that they can fix it after launch, a long time after launch in many cases, and have people say, well, it's good now, it's good now. Patience will probably run out if the industry keeps relying on that. But then the industry has been relying ever more on patches. Wish I could patch videos after they go up. Then I wouldn't have had to rush this morning to fix every instance where I said Shadow of Mordor instead of Shadow of War. I did get that right this time, didn't I? Yes, it was Shadow of War. I always get confused. Make your game sequels totally different names. Call it Superman Returns. That's what they should have called Shadow of War. Then I wouldn't have got the two mixed up. So that's on Warner Brothers and Monolith. So fucking sort it out and call your sequel Superman Returns. Anyway, while they're doing that, the rest of you can, as always, thank God for me. Yeah, that's a good idea. Thank God for me.